Ever wondered how a determined Canadian kid from a small northern town could become one of the most feared scorers in NHL history? Meet Phil Esposito, a trailblazing legend whose net front dominance and relentless spirit changed hockey forever. From his unstoppable goal streaks with the Boston Bruins to his historic performance during the 1972 Summit Series, Esposito's story is a roller coaster of passion, grit, and pure determination. Stick around to find out how he left a permanent mark on the sport. Phil Esposito was born on February 20th, 1942, in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, a northern Canadian town shaped by brisk winters and an almost spiritual love of ice hockey. Even from his earliest memories, he was as much a fixture at the neighborhood outdoor rinks as the snowbanks and frozen ponds themselves. Plenty of Canadian kids spent their afternoons in casual pickup games, but for Esposito, hockey quickly elevated itself from a fun pastime to an all-consuming passion. Friends and neighbors would talk about this stocky youngster who, with an uncanny knack, seemed able to slip the puck into the net from any angle. It didn't matter how small the opening was. Esposito would find it, bury it, and skate away as if it were the most natural thing in the world. By the time he was a teenager, his name was buzzing around the Sault Ste. Marie community as a rare talent with a seemingly bottomless well of ambition. That ambition was the engine that drove him through the junior ranks. His physique, solidly built and powerful, meshed perfectly with a playing style that was aggressive, opportunistic, and fearless around the crease. Scouts from the National Hockey League started paying attention. Despite the stiff competition from countless Canadian kids dreaming of the NHL, Esposito's skill set demanded notice. Soon, the Chicago Blackhawks took a chance on him. That's where his professional journey began, and while Chicago may not have been where he became a superstar, it was undoubtedly the place where he cut his teeth in the highest level of hockey in North America. In Chicago, Esposito observed veterans and soaked up the nuances of the pro game. He learned the finer points of positioning, how to navigate the physical nature of NHL defenses, and how to use his sturdy frame to his advantage. Although he had memorable moments with the Blackhawks, the team had its own particular chemistry and star dynamics that didn't necessarily revolve around Esposito. Whether it was a matter of not quite finding the right line mates or simply needing a fresh start, his true breakout came only after he was traded to the Boston Bruins in 1967. That trade would prove transformative, not just for Esposito, but for the Bruins and for the NHL as a whole. Boston fans were hungry for a resurgence in the late 1960s. The Bruins hadn't won a Stanley Cup since 1941, and their fan base was itching for glory. The city, known for its passionate sports culture, was ready to embrace a new star. Esposito arrived alongside Ken Hodge and Fred Stanfield, and this trio would fundamentally alter the team's identity. But it wasn't just about them. It was also about Bobby Orr, the transcendent defenseman who had landed in Boston a few years prior. Together, they changed the Bruins from a perennial underdog into an offensive juggernaut. Esposito discovered that playing with someone like Orr, arguably the greatest defenseman of all time, opened up endless opportunities for him to park himself near the net, receive pinpoint passes, and pounce on rebounds. Esposito had always been adept at scoring, but in Boston, he turned into a machine. Each shift, he seemed to sense exactly where he needed to be, a few feet from the goalie, stick poised to redirect or snap home a shot. He had a surprising quick release on his wrist shot, and if a rebound fluttered free, he was the first to jam it into the net. During one memorable stretch, he repeatedly put up 50-plus goals a season, a threshold that was considered extremely rare at the time. Fans marveled at his consistency. It was as if he had cracked the code on how to exploit defensive gaps better than anyone else in the league. His approach was direct, relentless, and physical. Esposito wasn't the fastest skater on the ice, but he more than compensated with his hockey IQ and raw determination. Opposing defensemen soon realized that trying to budge him from the front of the net was akin to pushing a boulder uphill. He developed a knack for screening goaltenders, tipping pucks at the last millisecond, and corralling rebounds in heavy traffic. If a puck was loose within a few feet of the crease, chances were high that Esposito would secure it and convert. That specialized skill made him a lethal threat on the power play. Whenever Boston went a man up, the Bruins' strategy often boiled down to a simple principle: Get the puck on net and let Esposito create havoc in front. More often than not, that formula worked. From 1969 to 1975, Esposito dominated the scoring races. He won the Art Ross Trophy, awarded to the league's top point getter 5 times: 1969, 1971, 1972, 1973, and 1974, a feat that only a handful of players in NHL history could match or surpass. In 1970 to 71, he obliterated the single-season scoring record by netting 76 goals, a number that was downright astonishing at the time. He wasn't just piling up personal accolades, though. The Bruins also soared, capturing the Stanley Cup in 1970 and again in 1972. Esposito's presence made them an offensive powerhouse, and his synergy with Orr became a staple highlight on sports reels. Boston Garden roared night after night as fans witnessed one of the most dynamic duos in hockey history. During these years, Esposito's off-ice persona also blossomed. He had a fiery, outspoken demeanor. When something wasn't right, be it refereeing, the team's effort, or an opponent's antics, he let people know. Yet beneath that brash exterior, teammates often spoke of a player who cared deeply about the game, his team, and the fans who packed the Garden. He took losing personally, and his glare from the bench could say more than most players' entire interviews. This emotional intensity carried over into every shift he played. And it was precisely that blend of skill and passion that made him the kind of forward fans adored and rivals loathed facing. Despite his success with the Bruins, Esposito's star would ascend even higher on the international stage in 1972, during the legendary Summit Series between Team Canada and the Soviet Union. For hockey-crazed Canadians, this wasn't a mere exhibition. This was a symbolic clash of national pride, taking place at the height of the Cold War. Most Canadians expected their NHL superstars to roll over the Soviets, who, while known to be talented, were seen as untested against full professional rosters. The shock came early. In the first game in Montreal, the Soviets romped to a 7-3 victory. A chill ran down Canada's spine. How could these seemingly unstoppable NHLers fall so easily? Esposito was among the most outraged and the most determined. He'd been unstoppable in the NHL, but the Soviet style, rooted in disciplined passing, fluid movement, and constant skating, posed a brand new challenge. The Soviets didn't rely on brute force. They used orchestrated plays and relentless pace, unveiling a style that seemed to catch Team Canada off guard. But if anyone was going to turn this tide, it was Esposito. He stepped up as a spokesman, criticizing Canadian fans for booing the team and vowing that he and his teammates would fight to the bitter end. "We're trying," he famously implored in a post-game interview, his eyes flashing with equal parts frustration and resolve. Over the course of the next few games, the Canadians found themselves in seesaw battles. Sometimes they looked revitalized, matching Soviet speed and skill. Other times, the Soviets dictated the game, weaving mesmerizing attacks that left Canadian defenders clutching at air. Esposito took it upon himself to be the emotional fulcrum. He delivered thunderous checks, battled for pucks along the boards, and deflected shots from the point, with a knack that made many wonder if he had eyes in the back of his head. Whenever Canada needed a momentum shift, Esposito tried to provide it, either by scoring, setting up a play, or even dropping his gloves if he felt the moment demanded a spark of raw intensity. By the time the series shifted to Moscow for the final 4 games, the tension had peaked. Both countries recognized that these contests were transcending the realm of mere sports. The Canadians, bruised and at times demoralized, were greeted in Russia by a hostile crowd, intent on seeing the Soviet team finish what they'd started in Montreal. The series was incredibly tight, each game decided by the slimmest margins. Leadership became crucial, and Esposito's role grew even larger. He not only wore the jersey, but also the psychological burden of carrying a nation's hopes. In the 8th and deciding game, the team stood at 3 wins apiece with 1 tie. The Soviets took an early lead, fueling dread in Canadian hearts. The clock ticked ominously, reminding everyone that time was running out for Team Canada to salvage victory. Then, Esposito struck at a pivotal moment, using his trademark net front presence to seize control of a loose puck. He leveraged his body to fend off Soviet defenders and rifled a shot past the goalie. The eruption of noise was instantaneous. both from the Canadians who'd traveled to Moscow and from the countless fans watching back home on television. A single goal, yes, but it carried the weight of an entire hockey nation behind it. That was the goal that put the Canadians back within striking distance, psychologically fracturing the Soviet momentum. It also paved the way for Paul Henderson's late winning goal, often cited as the goal heard round the world. But many observers insist it was Esposito's tally that lit the spark for Canada's comeback, setting the emotional tone that the game was still within reach. When the final horn sounded, Canada emerged victorious, winning that decisive game 6-5 and securing the series. It became a defining moment, not just in Esposito's career, but in the history of international hockey. For Canadians, it was a reaffirmation of national pride at a time when the Cold War felt perilously close to everyday life. For the Soviet Union, despite the loss, it was evidence they could compete toe-to-toe with the best professionals in the West, a realization that would profoundly influence future international competitions. And for Esposito personally, it solidified his reputation as the unyielding heart of Team Canada. His tears, his impassioned speeches, and his spectacular play underscored how deeply he felt every shift. Returning to North America after the Summit Series, Esposito found that he had become more than just a star player. He was a symbol. Fans didn't just see him as a record-breaking scorer. They admired his leadership, his willingness to pour every last bit of himself into a game, and his refusal to cave under extraordinary pressure. The Summit Series might have overshadowed that year's NHL storyline for a while, but when the next season started, Esposito was back in a Bruins uniform, doing what he did best, lighting up the scoreboard. It was business as usual for one of hockey's finest snipers. His continued success in Boston only further elevated his status. He would go on to play a central role in the Bruins offense, but around the mid-1970s, the cracks began to show. A combination of aging, shifting team dynamics, and front office decisions heralded changes in Boston's structure. In November 1975, a blockbuster trade sent Phil Esposito from the Bruins to the New York Rangers, along with Carol Vadnais, in exchange for Gene Rattel and Brad Park, both legendary players in their own right. It stunned the hockey world. Esposito had seemed inseparable from Boston. He had played 8 full seasons there, winning 2 Stanley Cups and multiple scoring titles. So, the notion of him putting on a Rangers jersey felt surreal. Trades, however, are part of the game's business. Many fans assumed his prime might be behind him. Others wondered if he could inject new life into the Rangers the way he had done in Boston. In New York, Esposito continued to show flashes of his trademark brilliance. Though not as dominant as he'd been in his absolute prime, inevitable as he moved into his mid-30s, he remained a potent offensive force. He captained the Rangers and led by example, showcasing that battling spirit the New York faithful adored. While he never guided them to a Stanley Cup, he did contribute significantly to playoff runs, delivering key goals and once again providing a veteran voice in the locker room. His tenure in New York lasted until 1981, when he played his final NHL season at age 39, a respectable age to retire from such a grueling physical sport. By the time he hung up his skates, Esposito had accumulated staggering numbers. He notched 717 regular season goals, placing him among the all-time greats, and over 1,500 points across his storied career. Many of his single-season records and feats, such as his once record-breaking 76 goals in 1970-71, would eventually be surpassed by legends like Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. Still, for an extended era in the late 1960s and early 70s, Esposito was the unstoppable measuring stick for offensive output. But raw statistics only tell part of his legacy. For those who witnessed him in action, the intangible qualities loomed just as large: the grit, the heart, the unabashed passion. While some scorers do their damage from the periphery, Esposito thrived in the dirty areas. He took cross-checks to the spine and slashes to the arms, seldom flinching, always maintaining focus on the puck. When critics suggested his success was largely due to playing with Bobby Orr, he pushed back by showcasing that he could score no matter who was on the ice with him. His stint in New York, though it didn't yield championships, still saw him rack up significant totals, further proving he wasn't a mere beneficiary of Orr's brilliance. In 1984, Esposito received the highest individual honor in hockey, induction into the Hockey Hall of Fame. He joined an exclusive pantheon reserved for the truly extraordinary. In his acceptance speech, he singled out teammates, coaches, and family members who had supported his journey from the small rinks of Sault Ste. Marie to the biggest stages in the world. Through it all, he never lost that fiery personality or that grin that materialized whenever he converted a critical goal. Beyond his playing days, Esposito stayed intimately connected to the sport. He briefly coached the New York Rangers, served in various front office roles, and even co-founded the Tampa Bay Lightning, helping to expand the NHL's footprint into the southern United States. That pioneering move, championed by someone so strongly associated with cold Canadian winters, underscored his vision to grow the game beyond traditional markets. Though the Lightning's early years were rocky, the franchise evolved into a formidable presence, eventually winning multiple Stanley Cups decades later. In that sense, Esposito's fingerprints extend well past his on-ice achievements. He helped shape the business of hockey and stoked fan interest in regions that once regarded ice sports with skepticism. For any conversation about Esposito's defining moment, though, inevitably it circles back to the 1972 Summit Series. While fans in Boston or New York might regale you with stories of his multi-goal nights, many Canadians point to that culminating scenario in Game 8. The Soviets leading, time draining away, and Esposito muscling the puck into the net to keep Canada alive. The sheer drama of that event transcended sports. Political undertones simmered in the background, as the USSR was widely perceived as a mysterious, closed-off superpower bent on proving communist superiority in every possible arena. Meanwhile, Canadians viewed hockey almost as a birthright. The emotional meltdown that followed the early losses in the series revealed a deeply ingrained sense of identity. If Canada couldn't claim hockey dominance, who were they? Esposito's fierce refusal to concede remains one of the most enduring images from that series. When a microphone was shoved in his face after a tough defeat, his voice shook with a combination of rage and heartbreak. He didn't mince words in accusing Canadian fans of turning on them too quickly, and he expressed unwavering faith that the team could bounce back. Then, as if living a personal prophecy, he went out and delivered. By the time Paul Henderson scored the famous winning goal in the dying seconds of Game 8, Esposito's earlier contributions had tilled the psychological soil for that moment. He had scored earlier in the game, fueling the belief that a comeback was possible. From a broader perspective, that performance crystallized a common theme in Esposito's career. The bigger the stakes, the more determined he became. He seemed to thrive on adversity. When he felt cornered or doubted, he rose to the challenge, summoning an inner well of energy and focus that could change the momentum of a contest. Even outside the Summit Series, during his stints in the NHL playoffs, he was known as a clutch performer, netting numerous crucial goals in big spots. Today, decades removed from his retirement, the legacy of Phil Esposito looms large. Younger generations who never saw him play live may only know him through grainy highlight reels, stories from parents or grandparents, or perhaps a statue or plaque erected in his honor. But hockey historians consistently place him among the top centers in NHL lore, side by side with other prolific scorers like Gordie Howe, Marcel Dionne, Mario Lemieux, and Wayne Gretzky. While the sport has changed drastically, team strategies have evolved, players have become faster, goaltending techniques more advanced. The essence of scoring goals still remains a treasured skill. And in that department, Esposito was a master of his craft.